Welcome to the Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception review. The story for Uncharted 3 is that Nathan Drake is on a adventure with Sully to find an ancient city in the Rubicali Desert, and it involves Sir Francis Drake, whose ring is a key to finding it, and Nate had the ring for about 20 years. When he first got the ring is when he also first met Sully, who was working for a woman by the name of Marlowe, and she also wanted the treasure for evil purposes, and she brought in somebody to help her, and that guy's name is Talbot. So it's up to Sully and Nathan to beat them to the ancient city and stop them of what their plans are. Elena is in the game, and she plays a part where her and Nate did get together at the end of Uncharted 2, and that they actually were married for a time, but it didn't work out for them. And you see her relationship with Nate really showing that very negative, because while he's adventuring in that, she also is along, and she looks at Nate and says, "Why are you doing this? Why you beat them?" But she ultimately realizes that he does need to stop them. And at the end of the game, he ends up losing the ring of Sir Francis Drake, and he ends up looking at Elena and said, "I traded for a different ring, and it was an engagement ring, and it looks like they might get back together and officially be remarried." Chloe does return from Uncharted 2, and she is a part of Nate's crew at the beginning of the game, and she helps out through first few adventures they have looking for the treasure, and she ultimately leaves off because of a new character by the name of Charlie Cutter. He is he's a mysterious character at the beginning of the game because Sully and Nate are actually in a deal with Talbot, and they're about to give him a fake ring that looked identical to Sir Francis Drake's ring, and it does not work out, and ultimately ends up getting in a fight, and Cutter shoots Sully and Nate, and well, that's actually how the flashback of how Nate met Sully starts. But when Marlowe and Talbot leave, you find out AX did not kill Nate and Sully, and he threw out for the whole entire part until they get to Syria, and Charlie ends up breaking his leg, but also he was also drugged by Talbot, and he gave everything that he had for the adventure. All notes and that because of the drug that Talbot and Marlowe were using was like, it was like a truth serum that would basically make people be brainwashed and they could control them. The music in this game is really good. It is very composed to where you actually feel like you're in the world while these events are happening. Nathan and Sully's relationship plays a big part into the story because of how they first met, but also like how Sully took him in and helped him throughout his ways and made him into what he was, and that Nate almost cries at the end because he thought that Sully ends up dying, because when he gets to the ancient city, he ends up drinking some water that ends up making him hallucinate, and he thought that Sully died in front of him. Throughout the whole entire section, he is trying to get revenge, and ultimately he ends up seeing Sully, and he didn't realize if he was real or not, but he ends up realizing he's real because Sully hits him on the nose and says, "Never point a gun at me." And also for Sully and Nate's relationship is also Sully gets kidnapped, and Nate is all the way out in the sea because he also was kidnapped as well. And he finally makes it back on the land, and he walks through a whole entire desert just to go save Sully. And also during that, he actually gets on an airplane that ends up crumbling down while they're in the air, and it is probably one of the biggest sections in the game that's really iconic because like you see Nate actually fall out of the plane, and like he ends up grabbing onto some cargo that had a parachute to get down safely. But like it is so awesome. And for the gameplay of the game, there's some new weapons. You can now throw back grenades. You can drop above people to attack, and shields can now be a primary weapon. So if you have a shield, you can finally hold on to it, and it will not drop like in Uncharted 2. My pros for the game are the story, the gameplay, music, and the levels. Like I was talking about the airplane level, but also when Nate gets trapped, he's in the ocean, and he's on a ship, and ultimately he gets onto a big ship that he ends up damaging it where there's a lot of water going through, and he has to run all the way out, and it is very awesome for how they set it up. And the way the outcome ends is Drake jumps off the boat, and he ultimately ends up swimming to shore by a piece of wood. My cons for the game are the antagonists. I think that Marlon and Talbot are probably the weakest of these series, because like most of the time when you see them show up, usually it's when Nate and Sully usually they find a piece of the clue, and ultimately they're held at gunpoint by Talbot, and Talbot immediately takes it from them, and where it just gets really bland. And also you don't see Marlo a lot in the game until like they do get to the city, and ultimately you do see her die alongside Talbot also dies as well. And basically they use a lot of tactics that are really annoying. The boss fight at the end of the game is against Talbot, and it is also, I would say, very weak because it's just a hand-to-hand fight, except Talbot has a knife, so you gotta worry about that. And the only thing I will always say about that fight is that Sully does make an Indiana Jones reference, which is really awesome because I know the reference and mind what he's talking about. And that is one of my favorite Indiana Jones moments that Sully ends up doing. And my review score for this game would be a 9 out of 10. This game is really good. It is better than Uncharted 1, but it's not on the tops of those two Uncharted 2. I hope you like this review, and I will see you in the next review. Stanley is signing out.